case of Lynette Ponchus. Lynette Ponchus was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with two brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette was very active, sociable, and cheerful, so she was always popular in every group of friends. She was also very attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby, and he disappeared and ignored all attempts to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always kept a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believed that he would be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just two young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was not his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite this, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in February 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin had proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially publicized her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. First, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit him on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which an armed man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Ponchus. She was the only person with a motive against him. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly began to control things, and she wanted more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutally when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered her. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at Martin and Elizabeth's house. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin might owe large sums of money to criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his time with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him sometime before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack on Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or on mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method as long as Martin died, so that she could gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted to driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, saying that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believed Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in February 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died. She just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with her. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions from Joseph, the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, portraying herself as a victim. This tactic aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed. She only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to attempt to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon, but no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hopes she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. 34-year-old Christa Lewis lived in Lansing, Michigan in February 2008. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Brad Cornea. Christa went to Michigan State University to get a second degree. In November 2008, Christa finished her classes, then took the bus home to a rented house on Eureka Street. Since she broke up with her boyfriend and he moved out, Christa was worried about making ends meet. Christa talked to one of her friends just after 5 p.m. That would be the last time she was seen or heard from. She was supposed to attend a class at a greenhouse half a mile from her home just after 6 p.m., but she never showed up. Her friends tried calling her, but she did not pick up. They then entered her home. Inside, they found her beloved cat alone. It also appeared as if she had been interrupted while cooking. Christa was nowhere to be seen. Brad Cornea quickly became a person of interest in the case, but he denied any involvement. He also had an alibi. On the evening of November 11th, his truck broke down near College Road, about 8 miles from Christa's home. A police officer offered to help him, but Brad said that a tow truck was on the way, so the police officer left. Christa's father, Roy, went to the police station every day to ask if there was any more information and to make sure they did not forget the case. A few months later, while searching for Christa, investigators found Christa's driver's license, debit card, and her broken cell phone near College Road, exactly where Brad's truck had broken down. Investigators also found that Brad had lied to them. He said that he was not in the area of Christa's home on the day she disappeared, but his cell phone pinged very close to her home around the time she was last seen. Brad was then named the prime suspect, but he was not arrested. Brad's criminal history began when he was 18 years old. He broke into the apartment of a woman and a soldier. In 1986, he was sentenced to serve 10 to 15 years in prison. He was released in February after serving 14 years, but he was soon in trouble again. He assaulted a female family member and was sentenced to up to 8 years for child abuse. He was paroled in February 2007. It was then that he met Christa and they started dating. I also don't know what she saw in him. In 2017, Brad was sentenced to 16 to 40 years in prison for misconduct with a minor and using a computer to commit a crime. In February, a warrant for Brad's arrest was issued in connection to Christa's case. He is currently an inmate in the Michigan Department of Corrections. It is not known yet if any new information in the case finally led to the arrest. Ingham County District Court Judge Donald Allen said that even though Christa's body has not been found, Brad will have to stand trial. He also said that he watched the video of Brad's first interview with investigators after Christa's disappearance. Not once during the course of that did I see a person who seemed to be disturbed about the disappearance of Christa, Donald Allen said. He also pointed out that Brad did not once try to call Christa after she disappeared. This indicates Brad knew she was not going to pick up the phone. It will be difficult to convict Brad since there is no body, but not impossible. Prosecutors will have to show how unusual it was for the victim to just disappear. Christopher James Bush lived in Waikato, New Zealand in 1987. He had a wife and 2 daughters. Christopher owned the Red Fox Tavern. On the evening of October 24, 1987, he found himself in his office busy counting the money they made that night. A few of his staff members were busy closing up. Just after 11 p.m., 2 heavily disguised men came running into the tavern. One of them had a shotgun and the other had a bat. Christopher tossed a glass at the head of one of the attackers, but he missed and hit a framed photo behind him. Christopher was then fatally shot. The 2 attackers made off with almost $40,000. Investigators were quickly on the scene. They collected some pieces of evidence that they believed could be useful later. Over 200 persons of interest were identified by investigators based on witnesses. Most of them were ruled out as they had alibis. On Christmas Eve 1987, a man by the name of Philip Dunbier came forward, telling investigators he knew who committed the crime. He agreed to wear a wire and go talk to one of the attackers. In their conversation, the attacker admitted he was involved in the robbery. Investigators, however, did not believe it was enough to make an arrest at the time. They did question the 2 men that could potentially be the attackers. One of them was Michael Hogod, and the other had not been named yet. The unnamed man had just been released from prison for an armed robbery a few days before Christopher's death. Michael was also no stranger to committing such crimes. Over the years, investigators found more evidence against these 2 men. They had far more money to spend directly after the crime, and they were also seen near the tavern. The unnamed man also had the same shotgun that was used, and he tried to get rid of it shortly after the crime. In February 2021, investigators believed they had enough evidence, and the case went to trial that month. In February, Michael and the unnamed man were found guilty of murdering Christopher. 15-year-old Lorie Nessen lived in Columbus, Ohio in 1974. She attended Eastmore High School. Nessen performed well in school, becoming an honor student during her academic career. On September 27, 1974, she attended a high school football game. After the game was over, she went to a house party. Just after midnight, she started walking home. Lorie Nessen would sadly never make it home. The next day, her body was found on the west side of Reynoldsburg, Ohio, in a ditch. Her clothes were scattered across several miles. An autopsy was done, and it was determined that she passed away due to asphyxia of undetermined origin. This meant that investigators did not believe someone took her life. The family pleaded with investigators to reopen the case, and they finally did in February 2019. A new coroner decided to review the case. He determined as someone definitely took Lorie Nessen's life. In December 2020, 10TV aired a broadcast on the Lorie Nessen case. That night, a viewer called Reynoldsburg police with information I could finally solve the case. The woman said what happened to Lorie was very similar to what happened to her cousin Karen Adams. In March of 1975, 17-year-old Karen Adams left her home in Whitehall, Ohio. She told her parents that she was going to a girlfriend's house to pick up some clothes she had left there, but she actually planned to meet up with her boyfriend at a supermarket. Karen's body was found the next day in a ditch about 6 miles from her home. She had been assaulted and strangled. There are a lot of similarities between the two cases. Both Karen and Lorie were teenagers, found in a ditch and passed away within a few months of one another. Karen's case was solved over. In February 2011, Robert Meyer was arrested in connection to her case and convicted in February 2012 as his DNA was found at a crime scene. Meyer passed away just a few years after being imprisoned. There were DNA samples from 2 different men found at Karen's crime scene, but investigators were unable to identify the second man. Karen's cousin believed Meyer could be responsible for what happened to Lorie Nessen as well, and that is why she called investigators. In 2021, DNA testing was done to see if Meyer was indeed responsible for taking the life of Lorie. It was discovered that there were also DNA from 2 men found at Lorie's crime scene. One of the DNA samples matched the DNA of Robert Meyer. Investigators believed that the other DNA sample could potentially belong to Charles Weber. He was a friend of Meyer, and they both served time together in prison. Weber passed away in 1992 and he was cremated. Investigators had to get a DNA sample from Weber's son. It was then confirmed that Robert Meyer and Charles Weber took the life of Lorie Nessen. It was also discovered that the second man involved in taking the life of Karen Adams was in fact Charles Weber. Investigators believe that these 2 men committed more crimes, and they are investigating it. Detective Chuck Clark from the Franklin County Sheriff's Office had this to say, "I always had a feeling these 2 guys were responsible for more and what they were called for. They would drink, drive around the city, wherever, and they would approach girls and young women and were by themselves." 22-year-old Lloyd Perkins lived in Seaside, California in 1995. On September 21st, Lloyd was fatally shot by an unknown man on Amador Avenue in Seaside. The Seaside Police Department worked the case aggressively in the 1990s, and a lot of information came in, but there was never enough to pin down the suspect. In the early 2000s, the case was looked into again. Detectives made a little more headway and started to pin down people who were in the area at the time of the crime. In February 2010, Seaside Deputy Police Chief Nick Borges was working on a different case. During his investigation, he met Lloyd Perkins' mom, Gloria. She told him that her son's case was still unsolved. He promised her that he would not forget and that he would do everything in his power to make sure the case got solved. Recently, the Seaside Police Department joined the newly created Monterey County Cold Case Task Force. In April 2021, 40-year-old Anthony Randall was booked into the Monterey County Jail in connection to the case. Nick Borges said that people involved in the case had gotten older and were more willing to talk and share what they knew. The current detectives followed up on some leads, and they were able to identify several additional witnesses and get more information, really narrowing in on the suspect that they arrested. Some of these people had been interviewed in the past, and things didn't go very far, so they really did some good follow-up on it and were able to corroborate what some of the witnesses were saying. We are very confident that Mr. Randall is responsible for taking the life of Lloyd Perkins in 1995. Nick Borges lived up to his promise. He was able to tell Lloyd's mom the good news that an arrest had been made. The case of Eva Blanco. Eva Blanco was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain. Her father is Manuel Blanco, and her mother is Olga Puig. In 1997, Eva's family moved to Algete, a small city near Madrid. They chose this place to enjoy a peaceful life, away from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Of the three sisters, Eva, Rebecca, and Maria, Eva is known as the quietest girl when she is with her close friends and relatives. However, Eva always radiates as a cheerful, trustworthy, and wonderful companion. She is also very active in sports activities, and this passion brings Eva endless joy and happiness. At school, she is admired by many people for her charm and warm, friendly personality. Eva is a good example for her younger sisters and is a responsible girl. She always followed all the rules set by her parents, including the curfew, so that they did not have to worry or be upset. However, on a fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments of youth. They had no idea that this seemingly normal afternoon would soon turn dark and sad. On Saturday evening, as the sun set, they decided to go to a local disco to enjoy their strong friendship and spend time together until late at night. Eva asked her mother for permission to come home later than usual. Olga, seeing that her daughter was always responsible, agreed to let Eva stay until midnight before going home. It was late at night, and the clock struck 11:30 p.m. One by one, the group said goodbye to each other and returned home, including Eva. Little did she know that her journey home would lead to dangerous mysteries. Eva and her friend decided to take a shortcut through a vacant lot to get home faster. It was a route she had taken many times before, but fate had other plans for her. At 11:45 p.m., they parted ways, and Eva began walking through the familiar dark vacant lot. As midnight approached, Eva's mother became worried that her daughter had not returned home. She contacted Eva's friends for information, but they said they had split up and that Eva was supposed to be home by then. This made her even more worried. She decided to alert her husband, a tow truck driver, who soon began searching for Eva in town. They were joined in the search by their nephew, a local police officer, and the father of one of Eva's friends. At 1 a.m., Eva's parents reported their daughter missing to the local civil police station. However, they were disappointed by the lack of interest shown by the police, who took just over an hour to file a missing persons report. The police downplayed the seriousness of the situation, suggesting that children Eva's age were often on drugs and that she might be lying in a doorway or on the sidewalk. This clearly implied that they were not taking the search for her seriously. During the night, Eva's father visited the local civil police station 15 times. He was extremely frustrated and criticized the agency for not quickly organizing a search for Eva. He accused the civil police of neglecting their duties. However, the police denied this and explained that according to normal procedure, they would wait several hours before starting a search for a missing person. Meanwhile, Eva's father was still worried and hoping that his daughter would return safely. However, the real reason behind this delay remains unclear, adding to the uncertainty and despair. The search for Eva began at 2:30 a.m. Family, friends, and authorities searched the town and surrounding area. However, the police did not file a missing persons report until 8 a.m. By noon, Eva's family had contacted local television station Telemadrid, asking them to report on the incident. At 9 a.m., Eva's body was discovered by two elderly people, 6 kilometers from the town of Algete, near a road construction site connecting Cobina and Belvis de Jarama. This area is often chosen by young couples for private rendezvous in their cars. Initially, the discoverers suspected a serious traffic accident, thinking that she had been run over. However, when the police arrived, they discovered a much more horrifying truth. Eva had been brutally murdered, lying face down on the ground with multiple stab wounds. She was wearing jeans, a dark sweater, and hiking boots, the same clothes she had worn on the day of her disappearance. A sleeve of her jacket was missing, indicating a violent struggle. Investigators believe both Eva and her killer arrived at the scene by car. However, heavy rain overnight washed away tire tracks and other vital forensic evidence. Despite the difficulties, investigators discovered Eva's faint footprints and a crucial clue: the footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins. The findings offered hope for justice for the innocent victim. The Blanco family was notified by the police of the discovery of Eva's body. According to the autopsy report, Eva was stabbed 19 times in the back and died of blood loss at around 4 a.m. The weapon was a Navaja knife, 8 to 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide. Eva's death was a heartbreaking tragedy for the community. The attack began while the victim was still in the car and continued as she tried to escape up the side of the road. The wounds, especially to the ear and the back of the head, showed the brutal nature of the crime. The first wound was severe enough to cause death. Forensic evidence showed that the victim was also sexually assaulted. DNA samples from the same attacker were found on the victim's body and clothes, proving this barbaric crime. The discovery of a red cloth in the victim's mouth was determined to be from a regular car seat cover. This suggests that Eva was taken into the car after being kidnapped. This detail reflects the painful final moments of the innocent victim. However, since the body was found fully clothed and there were no obvious signs of violence, investigators and police initially thought it might have been a consensual sexual encounter that led to a dispute. They did not agree with the view that Eva committed suicide. The police expected the case to be solved quickly. They suspected that an acquaintance of Eva's offered to drive her and took her to a secluded place, a popular spot for couples, where the tragedy occurred. Police initially suspected Eva's ex-boyfriend in Fuente El Saz, but he was cleared after questioning. The investigation then focused on men known to Eva's family, specifically people she might have trusted enough to take a ride with. Nevertheless, as the case became more complex, police could not dismiss the possibility that the perpetrator was a complete stranger. But Eva's friends were adamant that she would never take a ride with a stranger and believed that she had been forced into the car. Adding to the mystery, some neighbors linked the incident to an unknown blue car that was seen in town around midnight following another girl. The driver was described as a blonde man in his 20s. Unfortunately, no one recorded the license plate number, leaving a vital clue in the case untraceable. During the investigation, investigators discovered unidentified male bodily fluids on Eva's body and clothing. However, this information was kept secret and not disclosed to Eva's family or the public. Simultaneously, the police secretly collected DNA samples from men who were related to or knew Eva to compare with the DNA found in the fluids. Eva's father, Manuel's DNA was taken from a cigarette he had smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the police. Other samples were discreetly collected from alcohol tests or from cups used by the suspect in a bar. Although no matches were found, the civil defense police still believe that the perpetrator is an adult male living in Algete or the surrounding areas. The investigation continues while Eva's family yearns to find out the truth. 8 months after Eva died in a tragic incident, her mother found 2 secret diaries in her daughter's room. The diaries were dated 1995 to 1996 and 1996 to 1997, in which Eva recorded details of her daily life up until the day she was murdered. Most of the entries revolved around Eva and her ex-boyfriend Miguel. Their names were repeatedly written in different colors of ink throughout the pages. Near the end of the book, Miguel's name was suddenly replaced by the number 343110, while Eva's name remained the same. Despite many attempts to decipher the meaning of this number, no one has found a satisfactory explanation. The true meaning of the number remains a mystery, leaving Eva's family and investigators haunted by this puzzling clue. After Manuel's DNA was ruled out as that of a suspect, He launched a campaign calling on Algiers residents to voluntarily provide DNA samples to help with the investigation. With the mayor's support, in November 1999, an official notice was issued asking all males over the age of 16, about 5,000 people, to provide hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial authorities rejected the proposal, considering it naive, inappropriate, and useless. Additionally, it could stigmatize those who refuse to provide DNA, a legal right without a court order. They also believed that the perpetrator would not voluntarily provide his DNA sample. Eva's father collected 2013 DNA samples from residents of Algiers and surrounding towns and sent them to the local court for a decision. The judge requested an opinion from the Madrid chief prosecutor on the legality of the testing. On March 30, 2000, the chief prosecutor stressed that only those suspected in the investigation should be tested, not all volunteers. Consequently, only 45 samples were tested, including 12 from Eva's relatives, acquaintances, and people with criminal records, especially cases involving sexual crimes and knife violence. Time passed and the case went cold. But the turning point of the case occurred when a woman reported to the authorities that she saw a suspicious man at the construction site around 8 a.m. before Eva's body was found. The man was sloppily dressed, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking as if he had been up all night, and appeared to be searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. Police considered her testimony credible as several other witnesses had also reported seeing the Renault 18, matching the fibers found on Eva's body. On October 28, 2013, police released a sketch of the suspect, made with the cooperation of a new witness. The man was described in 1997 as being about 35 to 40 years old, 170 to 180 centimeters tall, weighing 75 to 80 kilograms, obese, with short brown hair, a square face, hard features, and deep-set eyes. He was wearing a white shirt, a V-neck sweater, and was driving a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. A secret telephone number and email address were set up to collect information, receiving 100 emails by January 1, 2014. In late 2013, the investigation took a major step forward when DNA from the fluid suggested the suspect was of North African origin. Police asked 300 North African men who had lived in Algiers in 1997 to volunteer their DNA samples. A former neighbor of Eva's, now living in the south of France, had a close match to the killer, suggesting the DNA in question could belong to the neighbor's sibling. Subsequent DNA analysis revealed a man named Ahmed Chell. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was arrested outside his workplace in Villemomble, France, in a joint operation by the civil police and the French gendarmerie. Ahmed Chell was born on March 1, 1963, in Taza, Morocco. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in 1989 in Madrid and became a Spanish citizen in the 1990s. They had one child, and Eva was 5 months pregnant when Ahmed's wife was murdered. They were not registered residents in Algiers because they lived in the truck of Ahmed's employer, where he worked as a delivery man, about 4 kilometers from the scene of the crime. In 1999, the Chells moved to France, where they separated amicably but were still listed as married in Spain. In February 2003, Ahmed remarried a young Moroccan woman who lived near the Swiss border and had children. He worked as a welder on agricultural machinery but struggled with relationships with his colleagues. When confronted with DNA evidence, Ahmed claimed that 2 unidentified men had taken him to Eva's body and forced him to touch her. However, his ex-wife denied this, telling reporters that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did on weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had said he had been at the same club as Eva and had spoken to her after she had a fight with her ex-boyfriend. Eva returned to the club at 11 p.m. with friends instead of her brothers. Ahmed's ex-wife said that she and her brothers had not been questioned by the police. She denied that Ahmed was abusive but admitted he was aggressive when drunk. Female colleagues and clients found Ahmed unapproachable, aggressive when drunk, and unsuitable for women. Eva's family had little contact with Ahmed's brother and had not met Ahmed. On October 5, 2015, Ahmed attempted suicide but failed, after which he agreed to be deported to Spain for trial. At a hearing on October 13th, He remained silent but provided DNA. He was detained until DNA testing confirmed his involvement. In January 2016, the prison psychiatric unit removed Ahmed's anti-suicide measures. Ahmed claimed he had been forced to touch Eva, denied any penetration, but could not explain why his bodily fluids were present in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Ahmed was found dead in his cell, having committed suicide by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The trial officially ended on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, despite finding their daughter's killer, were disappointed that he was not held accountable for his brutal actions. However, they believe that justice will be served in the afterlife. Eva's story is a journey to find justice after loss. The community unites to find answers for the young girl whose life was taken. Angela Christine Mack was born on March 16, 1982 in Escondido, California. Just after middle school, her family relocated to Salem, Arkansas, in Fulton County. Their home was set in farming country in the foothills of the Ozarks. Angela was described as outgoing and fun. She quickly made a close circle of female friends. A friend of hers by the name of Tiffany Thomas described her. She was short and spunky, outgoing and dramatic, loud but so much fun. She was always trying to make people laugh, pulling a prank or playing a joke on someone. In 1998, 16-year-old Angela had a son named Michael with her husband Tommy Ritu. The marriage did not work out, so Tommy and Angela got divorced. In February, Angela had another son, Matt, with Jeremy Niederbrack. This relationship was also short-lived. In February 2002, Angela married James Cox. They lived in Salem, Arkansas. On May 29, 2002, Angela and James were involved in a head-on, two-car fatality crash on State Highway 9 in Fulton County. Angela and James sustained serious injuries but survived. The driver of the other vehicle, Susan Maines, passed away the next day in a Missouri hospital. The passenger, Lacey Maines, lost her unborn child. A lot of information about what happened after the accident is unknown. We do know that on September 1, 2002, Michael Ritu was reported missing by his father. Michael was last seen with Angela, who was also missing. Strangely enough, Angela was only reported missing in February 2004 by her mom, 2 years later. It is not known why her husband at the time, James Cox, or anyone else did not report her missing earlier. It honestly appears as if investigators only bothered looking into the two disappearances in February 2020. It was then that a new investigator, Dale Weaver, came out of retirement to look for leads in the cold case. He decided to make a timeline of the disappearances and also interview family and friends of Angela. After some investigating, Dale found that James and Angela went to the hospital after the car crash. James's brother, Jeremy Cox, went to pick up Angela and her son Michael from the hospital in Missouri. Jeremy was arrested for being in possession of a stolen vehicle. This left Michael and Angela stuck in Missouri. The two of them made their way to a farm owned by Clarence and Barbara Cruson. In October 2020, Dale Weaver contacted Barbara. She said that she remembered meeting Angela and Michael. Barbara claims that she and her husband, Clarence, signed papers to adopt Michael and that Angela went to California. After a few weeks, Angela changed her mind and wanted to stop the adoption. She then made her way back to the Cruson's farm in Missouri to pick up Michael. Barbara said that the last time she saw Angela and Michael was on September 1, 2002. In April 2021, investigators got Barbara to take a polygraph test. She failed. After the test, Barbara decided to confess. She told them that her husband, Clarence, took the lives of Angela and Michael. He then got rid of the evidence by burning their bodies in a furnace. Investigators could not question him, as his life was taken in February 2012. Investigators believe Barbara, and now see this case as solved. There are, however, still a lot of questions. Her family still does not know where her remains are. It also does not make sense to me how her husband did not report her missing after he was released from the hospital. The motive for the crime seems to be that Clarence was greatly angered by Angela changing her mind regarding the adoption. 29-year-old Carrie Watson lived in Johnson County, Kansas. He had a wife and children. In March of 1985, Carrie was heading home. When he got to his doorway, an unknown man snuck up on him and stabbed him several times. The man then went into Carrie's apartment and stole some items. Carrie sadly did not survive the stabbing. Investigators collected DNA evidence from inside the apartment and kept it to be used later. Investigators had some suspects, but they were never able to prove that any of these men committed the crime. Carrie's sister, Audrey Walker, always made sure that investigators never forgot Carrie Watson's case. In February 2021, with advances in DNA and a new set of eyes on the case, investigators finally found their man. In April 2021, 60-year-old Keita Rimes was arrested in connection to the case in St. Louis, Missouri. Kate Meyer, who is a crime scene investigator for the Johnson County Sheriff's Office, said that forensic evidence collected at a crime scene back in 1985 was tested again in February 2020 and then led to the arrest in February 2021. Due to the quality of the original scene processing and subsequent evidence storage, it was possible for additional analysis to be performed and actionable results to be obtained all these years later. Carrie's sister Audrey said that when she heard the news, the tears just started flowing. It was just an overwhelming sense of, "Thank you, God. There's some closure, like true healing can begin." She also said that Carrie was a loving, caring, and compassionate spirit toward other people. Audrey said that her family never gave up hope. "I understood that from 1985 to February 2021, there have been so many new processes in place for the criminal justice system that you cannot just walk away from what you did, even if it took so many years." 47-year-old Deborah Delzel lived in Sarasota, Florida in 1999. She worked as an office manager at a company called KMC Telecom. On March 28th, Deborah talked to her sister at around 4 p.m. That would be the last time anyone saw Deborah alive. She lived alone at 5356 Colony Meadows Lane in Sarasota, Florida. On March 29th, Deborah was supposed to be at work at 8 a.m. However, she would never arrive. Her manager was concerned and drove to her house at 10:45. He found that her house was locked, her car was still in the garage, and her TV was on. He also found that the screen to the pool area had been cut. This really concerned him, and the police were called. Officers entered the home using a window. Inside, they found Deborah's body. She had been assaulted and strangled. Investigators concluded that an unknown man scaled a 6-foot wall, cut a screen to the pool area, then went on to assault and strangle Deborah. DNA from the man was collected from her body. It was submitted to the National Combined DNA Index System, also known as CODIS. However, a match could not be made. Since then, numerous detectives and crime scene personnel have spent thousands of hours investigating this case. They collected nearly 100 DNA samples that were compared directly to the suspect's DNA. In February 2015, detectives began to research the viability of phenotype DNA analysis to help solve cold cases. Detectives contacted a company called Parabon Nanolabs. They can predict a person's physical appearance using their DNA. The system is called snapshot DNA phenotyping. In 2016, Parabon Nanolabs conducted a phenotype analysis of the suspect DNA collected from Deborah's body. This is the picture they came up with. A male, fair-skinned, with brown or hazel eyes and black or brown hair. Detectives used this information to review past subjects interviewed by detectives, develop new leads, and interview other people. In February 2018, detectives employed Parabon Nanolabs again to test the DNA against public DNA databases. Genealogical information was provided, which detectives used to create a family tree of the suspect. This led detectives to a man by the name of Joseph Fleming. Joseph had 2 sons, Luke and Jesse Fleming. Luke and Jesse lived at 5185 Magnolia Barn Drive in Sarasota, Florida. This is less than a mile away from where Deborah lived. Jesse is a convicted felon. His DNA was in the CODIS database. After DNA testing, he was eliminated as a suspect. Detectives were then able to obtain a DNA sample from Luke Fleming. After it was analyzed, it was confirmed that Luke Fleming took the life of Deborah Delzel. On September 16, 2018, Luke Fleming was arrested in Manatee County, Florida. He was 20 years old at the time of the crime. On February 27, 2020, Luke Fleming was found guilty. Deborah's sister had this to say, "Finally, after 20 years, we have a guilty verdict in this horrific crime against our beautiful Deborah, who we all love so very much." 22-year-old Kristen Swanson lived in Denver, Colorado in 1980. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant. On November 28, 1980, Kristen left work. Then she borrowed a friend's car to go home and change clothes before going to a party. Kristen never made it to her destination, however. The next day, her body was found lying across the front seat of a 1968 Chevy Malibu in northeast Denver. Kristen had been stabbed in the chest. Investigators found male DNA at the crime scene. It was tested against the DNA of Kristen's fiancé, Steve Hose, and other men in her life, but a match could not be made. In February 2010, the case was re-examined. DNA analysis was more advanced by then. Investigators decided to enter the DNA from the crime scene into the Cody's database. This time, they found a match. Roderick Elias was linked to the crime using the DNA. Back in 1980, he was on parole and living with his brother in Denver. In February, Elias was arrested in Topeka, Kansas. Investigators do not believe that Elias and Kristen knew each other before the crime. Kristen's mom and two sisters were ecstatic that an arrest was made and that justice would be served. Steve Hose had this to say, "Kristen was a wonderful, loving, and caring person. She was taken from us much too soon, and a lot of people tonight are going to be very happy about this news." In February, 54-year-old Roderick Elias was convicted of the crime by a jury after a 2-week trial. The case of Nicole Ford. Manipulation is a special psychological technique that allows one to achieve personal goals without considering the partner's interests. Notably, a skilled manipulator keeps people they need close to them for years, using various tactics, methods, and approaches in intimate relationships. Such manipulation usually makes the other party doubt the correctness of their decisions, feel guilty, and can significantly undermine their self-esteem. Typically, relationships with a manipulator start off ideally, as these individuals know how to gain trust, charm, and win hearts. They appear caring, understanding, empathetic, and someone with whom one can share joys and sorrows at any time. Gradually, they probe your weaknesses and begin to exploit them. Sometimes, such individuals even commit serious crimes through others in such a way that the manipulated person believes they are acting entirely of their own volition or for the greater good. The case of Nicole is not unique, but it serves as a vivid example of how a man can skillfully manipulate the emotions of women who are in love with him. He kept one lover from leaving for many years, destroying her emotional state with his actions and convincing her that she could not live without him. He persuaded another lover to commit a crime, convincing her it was a righteous act to save a child. He planned everything down to the last detail, but recordings from street surveillance cameras did not allow him to escape accountability. What is known about Nicole, or simply Nicole Ford, was born on July 11, 1989 in the northern part of the U.S. in a small town in Minnesota. There was almost no information about her parents and early life in public sources. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was very young, and her mother raised her alone, striving to provide her daughter with everything necessary and a good education. Nicole was one of the top students in her school, and she was also actively involved in sports from a young age, particularly track and field and martial arts, in which she excelled. In her senior years of school, she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to fighting crime and would serve in law enforcement. She did everything possible to successfully pass the exams and meet the physical standards required for admission to the police academy, graduating with honors. After finishing school and being admitted to the academy, Nicole moved from the small provincial town to the large metropolis of Minneapolis. In 2010, she was accepted into the Criminal Investigation Department of the main police headquarters in Minneapolis as an assistant investigator. and after several years of dedicated service, she was appointed as an investigator. Colleagues described her as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, without realizing it, Nikki became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. The perfect start to a doomed relationship. In 2012, at a Taekwondo competition, 23-year-old Nicole met a coach and martial arts master, Timothy Tim Ama, who was 8 years her senior and initially didn't spark much interest in her. However, the slender young beauty with luxurious long hair and a charming smile immediately caught his attention. It's worth noting that Timothy was known as a ladies' man with numerous romantic partners, whom he frequently changed and sometimes dated several women at the same time. He was skilled in winning over women he liked and was not accustomed to rejections. Timothy also lived in Minneapolis, quickly found out where Nikki trained, and obtained her phone number. He initially offered her personal training services, but almost immediately began courting her, quickly winning over her heart. Nicole saw Tim as a kind, open, and charming man. She developed a sincere affection for him and, before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love. Soon, they started a romantic relationship and began dating. Initially, the man behaved gallantly, showed care, and made every effort to demonstrate that he was a reliable person one could depend on. Amahara was strong, intelligent, eloquent, and had the ability to dominate the women who fell in love with him. The relationship progressed rapidly, and after a month and a half, they decided to move in together and live under the same roof. The first 6 months went wonderfully, and Nicole felt happy and loved next to this person. She opened up and trusted him, believing there were no secrets between them. However, Timothy's behavior gradually began to change. He revealed his true nature, but he did so subtly enough that his chosen one was not alarmed for quite some time. The sophisticated tormentor, Timothy was an attractive, witty, and charismatic man with a muscular build, enjoying success with the opposite gender. He took great pride in himself, and even after entering into a serious relationship, he did not stop flirting with other women, often doing so in Nicole's presence, which deeply hurt her and made her feel humiliated. At first, Nicole hoped that over time, her boyfriend would shake off his bachelor habits, become more restrained, and settle down. But months passed, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, Tim assured her that he loved only her and was passionate and tender as a partner. But outside the home, he did not miss a single opportunity to flirt and regularly engaged in affairs. Soon, Tim became openly annoyed by his girlfriend's jealousy. He began to snap at her, stating that he would behave as he wanted, and she had no right to tell him otherwise. However, he usually apologized afterward, telling Nicole that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she forgave him, continuing to make future plans. In the fall of 2014, during a minor domestic argument, Timothy unexpectedly flew into a rage, grabbed Nicole by the throat, and squeezed so hard that she couldn't breathe and almost lost consciousness. Suddenly, he came to his senses, let Nicole go, and pushed her so hard that she fell, hitting a wall. At that moment, she realized that this was an unhealthy relationship that needed to be ended immediately. However, her emotional attachment to the man was too strong, and it only took another apology from him for her to forgive him. In addition to bouts of aggression and infidelity, another extremely unpleasant trait of Tim's came to light. He was extremely jealous and obsessed with control. The man monitored every step his chosen one took her phone without permission, checked her contact lists, messages in messengers and social networks, and kept a close eye on who she talked to and where she was. This continued for several years. Tim could cause a scandal out of nowhere, unjustly accusing his beloved of infidelity, while he himself did not miss an opportunity to be unfaithful. He often resorted to physical violence, but continued to convince Nicole that no one would ever love her, as he did if she ever attempted to leave. When ending the relationship, the man resorted to blackmail, claiming that he would end his life, and it would be on her conscience. In November 2015, after another argument that ended in violence, Nicole packed her bags, and with a suitcase in hand, left the house. Timothy, who until the last moment did not believe she would do it, saw his partner leaving, chased her down outside, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back into the house. But the woman began to scream and struggle, attracting the attention of neighbors, and the man was forced to back down, letting her go. After so many years in an abusive and manipulative relationship, Nicole could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, Tim had no intention of leaving her alone. He merely switched tactics, moving from threats and blackmail back to romantic pursuits. He met her after work, sent flowers to her home, wrote messages filled with tenderness, and pleaded for a chance to start over. For over a month, Nicole was resolute and had no plans to return to her former lover. But in December of that same year, she unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant. This was certainly not in her plans, but the thought of not keeping the baby never crossed her mind. She knew that if her ex-boyfriend found out about her pregnancy, it would provide him with perfect leverage for manipulation in an attempt to win her back. So she tried to hide her pregnancy, but was unsuccessful. They still shared many mutual friends and acquaintances. So by January 2016, information about her expecting a child reached Timothy. There was no doubt about who the father was, prompting him to urge her to return to him, arguing that their child should be raised in a complete family. Nicole, who had grown up without a father herself, understood how challenging it would be for her and the baby. But she also realized that a life with a manipulative and cruel person would not lead to anything good. She adamantly refused to return to her ex-boyfriend, though she still had feelings for him. But she noted that she would allow him to participate in the life and upbringing of their child as a nominal father. On June 20th, 2016, Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy, whom she named Callahan America, as her former lover acknowledged paternity and declared his readiness to raise the child with her. However, it soon became clear that giving the baby this man's surname and registering him as the parent was far from the best idea. Despite Tim's assurances that he would be a good father, and his pleas to reunite so that Callahan could grow up in a complete family, in reality, he showed no interest in his son. The man had hoped that the child would become a reliable tool for manipulating his ex-girlfriend. But Nicole was no longer susceptible, and Amir quickly lost interest in the baby. Nicole took nearly a year of maternity leave and devoted herself entirely to caring for her little son. She hadn't even thought about new relationships, immersing herself completely in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree life with numerous lovers and casual connections. It got to the point where he had a signal, a purple light in his bedroom, which meant that the homeowner was alone and expecting company. Any of his lovers could respond to this signal, and after which the purple light would go out, signaling to others that Tim's bed was already taken. It was like something out of a red light district, but the man and his numerous partners were quite satisfied with this arrangement. In the same year of 2016, shortly after the birth of Callahan, 36-year-old Amher moved in and began living with his 18-year-old protege named Colin Ison. He had been training the young woman since she was 14, and she was deeply in love with her mentor, despite the significant age difference. Initially, the couple hid their close relationship, and to outsiders, they claimed that Colin was just renting a room in his house. However, it soon became apparent to everyone that a fiery romance was unfolding between the coach and his ward. Timothy was thrilled with his young lover, and according to friends, the girl resembled a naive child, trying her hardest to impress the man she absolutely adored. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work. She was raising her child alone, as the boy's father was hardly any help, and the young mother simply ran out of money, prompting her to end her maternity leave early. At that time, she was working as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis, and her work schedule could be unpredictable. During the day, little Callahan was in daycare, but if his mother was held up at work or called in unexpectedly, she would ask Timothy to look after their son. There were a few reasons for this. First, she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father, who had recently vowed to be involved in his upbringing. Second, since her former lover was not helping financially, she thought he could at least save her the cost of nanny services. Amma did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it, along with all related troubles, onto his young lover. Colin quickly developed a fondness for the little boy and loved taking care of him. Thus, the man dumped his parental responsibilities on the girl, explaining it by telling her that Nicole was a bad mother who did not want to care for her child and was looking for any excuse to offload her son onto them. In the February, Nicole, for the first time since breaking up with Tim, entered into a romantic relationship. Her new partner was a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford. He treated his beloved with tenderness and care and also felt paternal towards Callahan, expressing readiness to adopt the boy. Everything seemed wonderful, but that was until Amar found out about his ex's new relationship. Timothy did not love Nicole and had long stopped trying to establish any relationship with her. But the mere fact that she was now not alone and happy enraged him. It also ignited a furious desire to annoy or completely destroy these relationships. As his main weapon in this endeavor, he decided to use their son as well as the naive Colin, who believed every word he said. The child's father regularly reported to social services that Donovan was beating, tormenting, and treating his son cruelly, and that the boy's mother was doing nothing to stop it. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently visited the family. They never managed to confirm any instance of domestic violence, but each time, Nicole and her new lover were interrogated like criminals. They knew who was trying to ruin their lives, but were powerless to stop it. And this continued for years. Simultaneously, Timothy kept convincing Colin that Callahan was in danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that one day, they might simply end his life in what they would claim was an accident. The girl believed her lover, felt terribly sorry for the boy who had literally grown up before her eyes, and was ready to protect him. Timothy literally harassed his ex and her new partner, threatened them, tried to provoke them, and even filed police reports, claiming that these law enforcement officers were abusing their official powers, hoping they would be fired. Donovan tried to have a man-to-man talk with Timothy, but it yielded no results. The ex-boyfriend continued to terrorize his former girlfriend and her new boyfriend, turning their lives into a real nightmare. In the battle for the little son, Tim decided not to stop at just threats and harassment, and soon took the matter to court, claiming his rights to the child and his desire for sole custody. Nicole did not anticipate this and was genuinely frightened. Knowing her ex's ability to lie and manipulate, she understood that he didn't actually want his son. He just wanted to get back at her for her happiness with Donovan. At the same time, Nicole finally decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed. She was confident that the custody issue would likely resolve in her favor. But she also realized that the legal battles could drag on for years, as Tim was not one to back down easily. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to poison his ex-girlfriend's life, concocting various fabrications. He even tried to accuse her of attempting to take his life, claiming she had tried to run him over with her car. He claimed that he managed to jump away just in time, and that Nicole only ran over his foot. Astonishingly, he took this case to court, but he couldn't prove anything since there were no witnesses, no camera footage, and importantly, no actual injury. In September 2022, the custody case went to court. The man once again tried to slander his former lover, accusing her of harming their child, and even secured support from Colin, who corroborated his story. He also tried to persuade little Callahan to say that his mom and Donovan were hitting him. But the child not only refused to lie, but also revealed that his father was coaxing him to lie by promising him sweets. The court took the child's account into consideration and awarded sole custody to the mother. Nicole was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. Initially, he secured the right to see the child once a week under the mother's supervision, and later, he was allowed to spend time alone with the boy without Nicole's presence, which greatly upset and frightened her as anything could be expected from him. Ultimately, after several more court appeals and to avoid further disputes, Timothy was allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to prevent parents in conflict from encountering each other and causing further psychological damage to the children. The facility had multiple separate parking lots and separate entrances, so one parent could bring the child for the other parent to meet. But the ex-spouses did not interact or even see each other. The mysterious attacker. On April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son after another visit with his father, something unforeseen happened. She parked her car and was heading towards the entrance, but she didn't make it inside. Suddenly, a person dressed in black clothing, a mask, and a hood approached her, pulled out a gun, and shot her 4 times at close range, then quickly disappeared in an unknown direction in a black pickup. Incredibly, Nicole not only remained conscious, but also managed to dial emergency services. However, she couldn't convey anything to the dispatcher. One of the bullets hit her neck, missing the carotid artery by a millimeter and damaging her vocal cords, so she could only make gurgling sounds. At that moment, a woman who happened to witness the event came to her aid. She was just passing by when she heard the shots and saw the fleeing black figure jump into a vehicle and disappear. The woman quickly pulled over, made sure the shooter had left, and then rushed to help the victim. She was the one who explained to the dispatcher what had happened, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, saving her life. The victim spent several days teetering on the brink of life and death in a coma. She lost a lot of blood, and her vital organs were affected. But despite the severity of her injuries, doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery, and the other nearly struck her heart. The woman survived, and now it was necessary to figure out who wanted her dead. Prime suspect, Nicole had no doubt that her ex-lover was the one who had shot her, which she reported to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Earlier, while the woman was in a coma, Donovan had also informed the police that apart from Timothy, the victim had no other enemies. Timothy was indeed interrogated and checked first, but he had a solid alibi as he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. Simultaneously, the theory was investigated that someone among the criminals she had previously arrested and helped incarcerate individuals who might have organized the attack on the police officer and investigator. Undoubtedly, due to her profession, she could have had ill wishes, but Nicole herself was convinced that Timothy was involved in the assassination attempt. At the scene, 4 casings were found, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. This same vehicle was mentioned by the eyewitness, who had essentially saved the victim's life. Thus, it was necessary to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, the suspect mentioned that he had a Chevrolet Traverse SUV in his garage, and he also owned a Dodge Challenger. However, according to Timothy, he never had a pickup. Yet, the investigation showed that the man was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. Once the truth emerged, Timothy was arrested pending further investigation. When shown the surveillance footage, he recalled that he did indeed have such a vehicle, but claimed he rarely used it and it mostly sat idle. Moreover, he noted that his pickup had colorful stickers on the doors and hood. This was verified, and indeed his vehicle had stickers, but they looked as though they had been applied just recently. Nonetheless, all the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It turned out that Timothy's vehicle was equipped with a satellite navigation system, which allowed the tracing of the vehicle's entire route on that day. It was discovered that the car was brought to the back entrance of a school on the evening of April 18th. There it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced that the vehicle arrived there with license plates, but by the next evening, it left without them. The person who used the vehicle that day was of short stature, slight build, and from a distance, the silhouette appeared feminine. As a result, it was decided to immediately detain and interrogate Timothy's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search was also conducted at the couple's home. And although the weapon used in the crime was not found, law enforcement discovered ammunition of the same caliber used by the shooter. The frightened girl almost immediately began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that her lover had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to radically save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating his trusting young girlfriend, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence. And she unquestioningly believed every word her lover said. She felt immensely sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wished his son well and wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that her lover had provided her with the firearm and had taken the pistol back after the assassination attempt and disposed of it. But she did not know what exactly he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, a point that the defendant's lawyers emphasized. Nevertheless, the decisive factor was Colin's confession, who still could not believe that her lover had deceived her and believed that they were committing a righteous act. The court also considered the testimony of the victim herself about what kind of person Timothy was and how skillfully he had always managed to manipulate the women who loved him. 42-year-old Timothy was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, the maximum term for such cases. 24-year-old Colin Larson, as the executor, received 16 years in prison. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole managed to fully recover physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and the man became the best father Callahan could ever wish for. The now married couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life then will be the child's godmother. Finally, it should be added that Timothy, with good behavior, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew lived in Colorado in 2020 with her husband Barry Morphew and their two daughters Mallory and Macy. On May 10th, Suzanne went for a bike ride near Maysville, Colorado. When she did not return home, her neighbor reported her as missing to the police. The only thing that was found in the wooded area Suzanne went biking was her bike, but there was no sign of her. Barry posted an emotional plea on Facebook shortly after her disappearance on May 17th saying he would do whatever it takes to get her back. Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there and can hear this that has you, please will do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you. We miss you. Your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you. I want you back so bad. Over 70 investigators from multiple agencies worked the case. They conducted 400+ interviews, conducted 135 search warrants, and followed up on over 1,400 tips. Despite the case going cold at one point, investigators now finally have their man. On May 5, 2021, Barry Morphew was arrested in connection to the case. He was also charged with tampering of evidence and attempting to influence a public servant. Barry is being held at the Chaffee County Detention Facility without bond. According to Chaffee County Sheriff John Speasy, have enough evidence that Barry took his wife's life even though her body has not been found. Officials unfortunately cannot discuss what led them to charge Barry nor give a motive for the crime. John also had this to say, rather, it's a next step in this very difficult, yet very important journey as we seek justice for Suzanne and her family. He thanked the FBI, Colorado's Bureau of Investigation, and the Office of 11th Judicial District Attorney, Linda Stanley, for their roles in breaking the case. Suzanne's sister thanked law enforcement and said that she is very grateful. Today, justice is beginning for my sister. It's been a journey that no one ever imagines that they'll take. Some of the things we do know is that Barry was at a hotel in Broomfield, Colorado on the day his wife disappeared. He mysteriously left the room reeking of chlorine and covered in wet towels. Barry sold off the home he and Suzanne shared for over $1 million. A few weeks after Suzanne disappeared, he bought a 2-acre plot in Salida, Colorado, then sold it in February 2021. In November of 2020, a search was done at the plot after Suzanne's brother Andrew paid $18,000 for the search. Cadaver dogs were used and they did pick up the scent of human remains. District Attorney Linda Stanley also played an integral part of getting the case to the point it is in now. This is what she had to say. Today is all about Suzanne, and it's about her family. And it's about all the individuals that knew her and loved her and cared about her. So far, these are the only details made available to the public. But for now, it seems the person responsible is behind bars. "22-year-old Danny Geyser lived in Pittsburgh, California in 2000. He was a talented young hairdresser and was about to start a new job as a custodian at Pittsburgh Unified School District. Sadly, he would never start his new job. On September 27, 2000, Pittsburgh police received a 911 call. A man had been shot while sitting in his car. The victim was Danny Geyser. He was taken to Sutter Delta Medical Center, where he passed away due to his injuries, less than an hour later. The only lead investigators had at the time was that an attacker possibly fled a crime scene in a light-colored Ford Mustang. Investigators have spent the last 20 years looking into numerous persons of interest and suspects. A break in the case finally came in 2019. Investigators identified Payat Hassaini as a possible suspect. They have not yet said what led them to him. Investigators secured a search warrant and obtained new evidence in connection to the case. In 2021, investigators believed they had enough evidence to convict Hassaini for taking the life of Danny. In February 2021, 45-year-old Hassaini was arrested at his home in Alcove, California. He was not just arrested for taking the life of Danny, but also a man by the name of Kenneth Brown Jr. He is currently jailed at a Martinez detention facility on a $10 million bond. Investigators have not yet said what the motive for the crime is. A picture of Hassaini has also not yet been made public. There is not really a lot of information about a Kenneth Brown Jr. case. I could only find how it took place on January 4, 2000. Not much is known about his next case. 64-year-old Luis Masa lived in Orange County, Florida. In December 2016, his body was found in front of his car on his driveway in Terrell Road. He passed away due to blunt force trauma. Someone had hit him over the head using a large lawn ornament. Some of his rings and phone had been stolen. There was also a broken window in his house. This made investigators believe that Luis interrupted the burglary. Neighbors told investigators that a man jumped a fence after triggering the house alarm just before police arrived on the scene. Witnesses helped investigators create the composite sketch. Investigators also found that another burglary took place, less than a mile from Luis' home, a few days before his life was taken. Fingerprints were collected at a crime scene. Recently, these fingerprints were tested to see if it matches anyone in a Cody's database. This led investigators to Devin Hill. When questioned, he admitted that he took Luis's life. He was arrested on January 29, 2021. He is currently being held in an Orange County jail without bond. "29-year-old Evelyn Day lived in Weld County, Colorado in 1979. She worked at Ames Community College. Evelyn was last seen on the night of November 26, 1979, when she was locking up her office. The next morning, her husband Stanley realized she never returned home, and he filed a missing persons report. Later that day, Evelyn's body was found in a vehicle, parked on a side of the road, close to her office, by two of her co-workers. She had been assaulted and strangled, using a belt from the coat that she had been wearing. Investigators collected DNA from her body and questioned men they believed could have been involved, but the case went cold. In May of 2020, Evelyn's case was reopened by Weld County Sheriff's Office Detective Byron Castellan. He asked that the DNA evidence found at the crime scene be submitted in the National Combined DNA Index System so that it could be compared to millions of profiles. On August 26, 2020, Byron received a call notifying him that the DNA found at the crime scene matched the DNA of James Herman Dye. James was a convicted felon with a long criminal history in Kansas and Colorado. In October 2020, Byron submitted an order to Ames Community College to produce records of student and employee rosters. He found that James was enrolled in classes in the summer and fall of 1979, the winter of 1980, and the summer of 1982. While reviewing case files, Byron also found that there was a Crime Stoppers tip in September 1988. According to the tip, James arrived home with blood all over his clothes on the night of the crime. He also knew a woman's life was taken before he made the news. No follow-up was ever made on the tip. After asking for more records, Byron found how James was enrolled in a steering and suspension system class, very close to Evelyn's office. James' behavior and attendance changed in the days and weeks after the crime took place. Byron Castellan also interviewed family members of James. They all believed he was capable of committing the crime. In March of 2021, James was arrested. He denied knowing Evelyn, making physical contact with her or taking her life. He also said he did not remember specifically what he was doing on November 26th and 27th of 1979, as it was so long ago. He is currently incarcerated at a Sage Week County Jail in Kansas and will be taken to Colorado soon to stand trial. 79-year-old Viola Hacken Court lived alone in an apartment in Anaheim, California in 1980. On February 18, 1980, a neighbor of Viola became concerned about her whereabouts. Viola was often seen walking around the apartment complex, but she hadn't been seen for 2 days. The neighbor stepped inside Viola's unit and found her lifeless body. She had been assaulted and strangled. Over the years, detectives attempted to solve the case, pursuing new leads or bits of evidence, had failed to identify a suspect, and the case went cold. In September of 2020, the case was reopened. This time, investigators turned to genetic testing technology, which has been used to solve thousands of cold cases across the U.S. Investigators used DNA found on Viola and compared it with genetic profiles on genealogy databases. This led investigators to 64-year-old Andre William Lepier. He was arrested on April 28, 2021, at his home in Alamogordo, New Mexico, in connection to the case. He is being held without bail at a Nataro County jail. It is not believed that Andre and Viola knew each other. Viola's family had us to say in a statement, was a beautiful, happy soul and did not deserve being violated in her final years of life. We are so grateful for the Anaheim Police Department never giving up after 41 years. My sister was relentless and never gave up pursuing this, and that is our message, never, never give up. Andre was in his 20s at the time of the crime and lived close to Viola in Anaheim, California. In the 1990s, he moved east. He spent his time between Arizona and New Mexico. Andre worked as a plumber and a truck driver. He married twice and had 2 children. Investigators have not yet established a motive for the crime. Before Paul met Joanne, he had been in serious relationships with women more than once. For example, in 1993, during his university years, he was with Carrie Thompson. Although he didn't stay with her for long, this relationship revealed his violent tendencies. Carrie told the police about how Paul could switch during an argument and become aggressive, beating the walls and holding Carrie by force. This was just the beginning. In 1999, Jenny Mary Clark appeared in his life. They wasted no time, and just 2 weeks after meeting, the wedding bells were already ringing. However, their marriage began with a real nightmare. On their wedding night, Paul attacked Jenny, and this was not a one-off incident. He continued to beat her and even strangled her into unconsciousness. Investigators claimed that this abusive behavior was repeated with Joanne. Despite this situation, Paul and Jenny decided to have a baby. Their daughter, Chloe, was born in 2000, and they divorced shortly after. When Chloe was 5 years old, Jenny met Joanne and immediately realized that Joanne was too naive for such a rude man and would face a tough battle with Paul. In 2002, he broke up with Jenny and began dating Joanne Nelson. Katie, Joanne's sister, said that Joanne most likely did not know about his criminal history. Otherwise, she would not have continued the relationship or wanted children with him. Their story began on the streets where Paul worked as a security guard in bars and clubs. He was 27 and already experienced in relationships, while Joanne was just starting her journey into adulthood at the age of 19. Despite the age difference, they found support in each other, running away from their parents' control and looking for their own space. At first, they lived with Paul's mother, and then they could afford to buy their own house. But happiness was slowly disappearing, fading away like smoke from a fire. The days turned gray and the tension grew between them. For Joanne, everything had become too mundane and boring. Their differences began to affect the relationship. She loved order while he did not give it much thought. On February 14, 2005, Joanne did not come to work. This was unusual and caused immediate concern. As the investigation revealed more and more information, the previously quiet and peaceful town was overtaken by a wave of shocking lies and deception. Joanne Nelson, a cheerful and bright young woman, always put the happiness of her loved ones above her own. As a child, she lived with her parents in the town of Hull, also known as Kingston upon Hull, on the east coast of Yorkshire, England. Her mother, Jean, was a teaching assistant, and her father, Charlie, worked as an engineer for the city council. It was in this town that Joanne grew up and became who she was. Joanne had a bright personality and was successful both academically and socially. She was an active athlete who loved netball, lacrosse, and swimming. She lived happily, enjoying her youth, but always harbored a deep desire to create her own family. She initially tried her hand at medicine, but the emotional toll of being a nurse proved too difficult for her. Her loved ones remember how she would come home saddened by the suffering of her patients. Later, Joanne considered working abroad, but ultimately chose to work at an employment center in Hull to be closer to her family and friends. She found fulfillment in making people's lives better by helping them find jobs and improve their skills. Joanne's dedication and kindness left a lasting impact on those around her, making her absence even more profound and alarming. When she did not show up for work that fateful February day. On Valentine's Day 2005, Joanne Nelson vanished without a trace, turning a day meant for love into a day of horror and mystery. Her disappearance was a nightmare for her parents. When her boyfriend reported her missing to the police, a sense of foreboding filled the air. That night turned dark and ominous, leaving Joanne's family and friends enveloped in fear and uncertainty. Instead of enjoying the evening with his beloved, Paul found himself speaking with the police. He claimed that the last time he saw Joanne was when she was asleep, and upon his return from work, she was gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving only shadows of fear and hope behind. At 22 years old, Joanne's sudden disappearance caused great distress among her loved ones. The situation became even more perplexing. When she missed significant events, such as her best friend's father's funeral and her sister Katie's 19th birthday, the police swiftly launched a large-scale search operation involving numerous law enforcement officers, military personnel, and volunteers. Joanne's father was vocal about his suspicions regarding Paul, questioning how he could be involved in the disappearance of such a responsible young woman. Katie, although aware of her father's concerns, found it hard to believe that Paul had any role in Joanne's vanishing. The family's worry and confusion only deepened as days turned into weeks without any sign of Joanne. Paul threw himself into the search efforts, collaborating with volunteers, concerned relatives, and friends. Despite lacking family consent, he granted multiple interviews to the press, keen to aid in the search. When questioned by a reporter over the phone, Paul vehemently denied any wrongdoing in Joanne's disappearance. He adamantly professed his love for her, asserting that he could never harm her. However, discrepancies emerged between his spoken words and his facial expressions. Expert Cliff Lansley scrutinized Paul's demeanor during a televised interview, identifying peculiarities. Notably, Paul failed to close his eyes while discussing Joanne, an anomaly for someone grappling with grief. Moreover, he displayed no signs of tears, raising suspicions. Further scrutiny came from Ray Higgins, the head of the investigation team at Humberside Police. Higgins reported observing nail marks on the back of Paul's hand, leading authorities to consider his potential involvement in Joanne's disappearance or death. Eventually, Paul's mother, unable to bear the emotional turmoil any longer, divulged crucial information about Paul's actions to the authorities, potentially shedding light on Joanne's fate. Upon learning of the accusations, Paul didn't attempt to refute his culpability, Just 6 days after Joanne's disappearance, he found himself in police custody. During a grueling interrogation, the truth emerged. On that fateful Valentine's Day in 2005, Paul committed the unthinkable act of ending Joanne's life in their own home. Paul recounted a tumultuous argument that escalated to irreparable heights. Joanne's constant criticism, particularly regarding household chores, served as the catalyst. According to Paul, Joanne's request for help with the washing machine triggered his anger and shame at his perceived inadequacy. Matters worsened when Joanne declared her intention to leave him and demanded the sale of their home for €110,000, further fueling Paul's rage. In a fit of fury, Paul confessed to the police, admitting to strangling Joanne with his bare hands. Subsequently, he displayed chilling composure as he meticulously orchestrated the aftermath, intending to conceal his heinous deed. He craftily devised a plan, seeking to fabricate Joanne's sudden disappearance. With calculated precision, Paul proceeded to carry out his scheme. He engaged in casual interactions with neighbors and discussed banal topics like acquiring a pet, all while concealing the darkness within him. Surveillance footage captured his unerringly composed demeanor as he purchased supplies, a testament to his disturbingly calm facade. Armed with garbage bags, rubber gloves, and disinfectant spray, executed his plan methodically. He bound Joanne's limbs, encased her in bags, and sealed them with duct tape. Then, without hesitation, he transported her lifeless body to her vehicle, his audacity matched only by the magnitude of his crime. The audacious act unfolded in broad daylight, revealing Paul's cunning and deceitful nature. With chilling composure, he concealed his heinous deed from unsuspecting onlookers, demonstrating his ability to manipulate those around him effortlessly. After concealing Joanne's lifeless body in her own vehicle, Paul embarked on a calculated journey. Driving approximately 75 miles to the remote Bradbury woodland near Winteringham in North Yorkshire, Paul carefully orchestrated each step. With meticulous precision, he carried Joanne's body through the dense forest, seeking a secluded burial site among the towering pines. Utilizing twigs to obscure the makeshift grave, Paul buried what he perceived as the love of his life. Returning to the victim's car, Paul resumed his facade of normalcy, showing no remorse or acknowledgement of his monstrous actions. He even fabricated a fake phone conversation with Joanne to divert suspicion, further highlighting his cold-blooded demeanor. Despite his attempts to deceive, Paul's consistent actions betrayed an alarming level of planning and premeditation. In the subsequent investigation, Paul's memory conveniently faltered regarding the exact location of Joanne's burial site. Detectives, led by the tenacious Ray Higgins, embarked on a painstaking 6-week search across 3 counties. Finally, on March 24th, after 39 days of agonizing uncertainty, the grim truth came to light. In a solemn operation led by Detective Phil Gadd, Joanne's remains were discovered in Bransby near York. Trembling with nerves, the search party followed Paul's descriptions until they stumbled upon the telltale signs: a garbage bag concealed beneath branches. Within it lay the heartbreaking evidence: Joanne's body wrapped in plastic, a tragic confirmation of the family's worst fears. March 24th marked the end of a harrowing ordeal for Joanne's family, bringing closure to their anguished search while cementing the grim reality they had dreaded all along. Paul's facade of strength hid a dark history of sexual violence against women, a chilling truth kept hidden from Joanne's family and the public until the trial. During his time working as a security guard at the club, he ominously referred to himself as a psychopath, sending shivers down the spines of those who knew him. Witnesses familiar with Paul from the gym recounted instances where he instigated fights in clubs and bars, painting a disturbing picture of his character. As the trial unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. It was revealed that Paul had been experimenting with steroids in a misguided attempt to sculpt his physique into that of a bodybuilder. His friends disclosed that he had battled alcoholism in the past, and his violent outbursts were likely exacerbated by his steroid use. Paul's educational background provided little insight into the darkness lurking beneath his seemingly ordinary facade. He attended Sydney Smith School before enrolling at Howe College, where he successfully completed a program in constructional engineering. Despite his academic achievements, Paul's journey took a sinister turn when he pursued a degree in horticulture at Bishop Burton College, completing it at the tender age of 17. These revelations painted a chilling portrait of a man whose outward appearance belied the deep-seated demons lurking within. Paul's transformation from a seemingly ordinary student to a perpetrator of unspeakable violence left Joanne's family and the community reeling, grappling with the horrifying reality of the darkness that dwelled within him. Paul's journey through life took him from Saudi Arabia to Somerton Road, where he worked diligently in various industries alongside his father, Peter Dyson. Together, they navigated the maintenance industry, honed their gardening skills, and delved into the intricacies of machining. Paul's employment history painted a picture of a young man eager to carve out his path in the world of work. However, behind the veneer of normalcy lurked a disturbing truth. At the tender age of 15, Paul's life took a dark turn when he crossed paths with Colin Allen, a martial arts expert with whom he formed an unlikely bond. It was to Colin that Paul confessed to a heinous crime, a confession that ultimately led to his arrest. Paul's acquaintances shed light on his complex character. While some saw him as charming and attractive to women, others witnessed a more troubling side to his personality. He often leveraged his position as a security guard to forge connections with women from higher social echelons, revealing a distorted perception of himself and his interactions. Colleagues and relatives offered contrasting portraits of Paul, depicting him as both outspoken and boastful about his athletic prowess, yet also capable of making disturbing statements. Shockingly, Paul's family recounted instances where he proudly boasted about his father's involvement in the deaths of 2 individuals. This seemingly incredulous claim, however, proved to be rooted in reality. Paul's father, Peter Dyson, had indeed served time in prison for the manslaughter of 22-year-old John Dickinson, a man with whom his wife had been unfaithful. The tragic events of 1967 cast a shadow over Paul's upbringing, exposing him to the grim realities of life and death at a young age. Through Paul's tumultuous journey, a complex and unsettling portrait emerged, revealing the interplay between family history, personal choices, and the darkest depths of human nature. In 1974, a mere 2 days after Paul entered the world, tragedy struck with haunting consequences. Peter Dyson, his father, found himself entangled in a fatal accident. Behind the wheel, he collided with 47-year-old Gordon Kell, who was returning home after jubilantly celebrating a silver wedding anniversary. In a chilling turn of events, Peter fled the scene, leaving Gordon to perish on the roadside. Despite the gravity of the situation, Paul idolized his father, viewing him through a lens of admiration and heroism. The untimely demise of Peter in 2000, succumbing to a heart attack in the midst of their life in Saudi Arabia, left an indelible mark on Paul's psyche. It cast a shadow over his existence, shaping the trajectory of his fate in ways both profound and ominous. As the trial unfolded on November 7, 2005, a hushed courtroom bore witness to a startling revelation. Paul, in a dramatic turn of events, stunned onlookers by entering a guilty plea. Joanne's family, bracing themselves for a protracted and grueling legal battle, found themselves thrust into a realm of disbelief and uncertainty. In a moment of collective astonishment, they whispered affirmations as Paul's admission reverberated through the chamber. Throughout the proceedings, Paul maintained a stoic demeanor, his gaze fixed straight ahead or cast downward, deliberately avoiding the piercing stares of Joanne's grieving loved ones and the scrutiny of law enforcement. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his impassive countenance, not even during the formal announcement of the charges against him. His lawyer, Harry Barrell, stood before the court, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. With unwavering resolve, he conceded that there could be no excuse for the heinous act perpetrated by his client. In the wake of Paul's shocking confession, a pall of solemnity descended upon the courtroom, marking the beginning of a harrowing journey toward justice and closure. On Tuesday, November 8th, nearly 10 months after the tragic murder, Paul received his sentence, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. Remarkably, just 14 years later, in November 2019, at the age of 45, Paul found himself transferred to an open prison and recommended for day release. The parole board cited Paul's active engagement in self-awareness programs and successful completion of an intensive interpersonal relationship improvement program. Recalling the day of Joanne's disappearance, Katie was struck by Paul's behavior. She now regrets offering him comfort when he appeared at her doorstep. Later, when Paul wandered off, Katie, consumed by worry, searched for him. Finding him at the bus stop, she squeezed his hands in an attempt to provide support as he sat there, overcome with emotion. She even embraced him, hoping to offer solace. Reflecting on the moment, admitted she hadn't initially noticed the scratches on his arm. But upon later reflection, she couldn't forgive herself for missing them. The easing of Paul's detention conditions and the prospect of day release stirred deep emotional turmoil within Joanne's family. Katie, speaking to the media, expressed their sense of loss and confusion in the face of this news. Paul's impending release dredged up painful memories of Joanne's untimely death, leaving the family grappling with a sense of injustice. Despite their belief that Paul didn't deserve such leniency for his heinous actions. Pamela Falcons lived in Faulkner County, Arkansas in 1990. She worked at a video store. On February 2nd, Pamela was the only clerk on duty at a Crossroads video store. At around 9 p.m., her husband, David Falcons, came to pick her up. There was no sign of Pamela. Her handbag, keys, and coat were in the store, but she was nowhere to be found. David reported her missing, and a search party was soon looking for her. It was a cold and rainy night, which made it difficult. The next day, two of Pamela's cousins made a grisly discovery off Clinton Mountain Road. At an old dump site, they found her lifeless body. She had been assaulted. The fatal injury had been a blow to the head. Male DNA was collected from her body. Investigators asked anyone with information to come forward. A young couple told police that they left the store at 8:40 p.m., just as a man was entering it. He was a tall, heavy-set white male in his 40s with a tattoo on his left arm. Someone eating at a Wagon Wheel restaurant next door to the video store claimed that he saw a vehicle there around the time of the abduction. It was described as a light blue Chevrolet with a white panel and white camper shell. Everybody, even 100 miles, was on a lookout but never saw it. By 2018, DNA technology had advanced to the point where forensic genealogists could search ancestral databases for matches to DNA samples found at crime scenes. Using this technique, they believed that Edward Reniger took Pamela's life. He worked as a truck driver. At the time of the crime, he lived in Faulkner County. He had been a customer at a video store many times. He had a history of assaulting women, and he served 10 months in prison in 1994. In 2002, he passed away in Salt Lake City, Utah, due to natural causes. Investigators collected a DNA sample from Edward's daughter. It was then confirmed that he took the life of Pamela Falcons. Denise Pulser was a 24-year-old woman living in Manchester, New Hampshire. She worked as a bookkeeper for a small company. On January 17, 1985, she disappeared, and her only lead was a note that was left behind. A few days after her disappearance, police found her pickup truck at Logan Airport in Boston. Her social security card, certificate, and credit cards were neatly organized in the car stall. A year after she disappeared, she was indicted in absentia for embezzling $12,000 from the company she worked for. That was all the police had to go on, and the case went cold. That was until 17 years later, in 2002. It was then that the FBI believed they found her. She was now going by the name of Denise Jones. She was still a bookkeeper and had started a new family. The now 42-year-old Denise was elated to see her family when they knocked on her door. She explained that her boss wanted to end her life because of the embezzlement. The county prosecutors dropped the charges against her because her former boss was long deceased. Denise lived in South Carolina, the Bahamas, California, and Hawaii while she was missing, and lived in Florida since 1996. Her current husband was stunned, but said a lot of things that didn't make sense before, did now. His wife would always be depressed on Mother's Day and out of sorts on holidays. She never talked about family. Jodine Sirin lived in San Diego, California in 2007. She was mentally disabled but a highly functioning individual. Jodine loved helping others. She volunteered at her church and at the San Diego Humane Society and was active in the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. Jodine loved animals and also enjoyed biking, kayaking, and walking on the beach. She lived alone in a ground-level condo in Carlsbad, California, had her parents bought for her. On Valentine's Day 2007, Jodine's parents went to check up on her to make sure everything is okay. Everything was not okay. Inside of the condo, her parents found a man that they did not know. They told him to leave. When they entered Jodine's room, they found that she had been assaulted and strangled. Despite seeing the attacker's face, the case would take over a decade to be solved. In 2018, investigators decided to contact the company that you might have heard of, Parabon Nanolabs. The company specializes in something called DNA phenotyping. This is a process of using unidentified DNA evidence left behind at a crime scene to predict someone's physical appearance and ancestry. It is used by law enforcement to generate leads in criminal investigations, narrow suspect lists, and identify unknown remains. Parabon Nanolabs created this image to show what the attacker may have looked like back in 2007. They also made use of genetic genealogy. This is a process where they use DNA evidence found in the crime scene to create the family tree of the suspect. It finally led investigators to David Mabrito. He was a transient and took his own life in 2011. It was David's relatives who entered their DNA to a public DNA database and led investigators to him. The Oceanside Police Department in California was also able to help. They had a sample of David's DNA they collected at a traffic stop. This DNA also matched the DNA found at a crime scene and confirmed had David took the life of Jodine Sirin. Her family are thus to say in their statement, "There was joy in her laughter, love in her heart, and faith in her soul." The Sirin family is forever grateful to the Carlsbad Police Department for the outstanding efforts in attaining justice. Pamela Coahones grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota, in 1984. 25-year-old Pamela enlisted in the Navy. In May of that year, she left behind her family and flew across the country to Orlando, Florida to begin training at Orlando Naval Training Center. Sadly, Pamela never had a chance to see her dreams come true. 2 days after her graduation in August 1984, her lifeless body was discovered in front of a vacant home in Sanford, Florida. She had been assaulted and strangled. Investigators were able to collect DNA belonging to an unknown man from her body. In 2000 and 2005, investigators unsuccessfully attempted to find a DNA match to Pamela's attacker. In 2015, investigators finally got a break. DNA from Pamela's clothing was submitted to a private forensic genealogy service. Investigators were able to access DNA profiles of individuals who submitted their DNA to genealogy websites. They found a match to a distant relative of Pamela's attacker. Investigators began to build a family tree and eventually led them to Thomas Lewis Garner. He worked as a dental hygienist in Jacksonville, Florida. Thomas was a classmate of Pamela back in 1984. Investigators had to make sure they had the right guy. They collected a cigarette that he had smoked. The samples matched the DNA found on skin collected from underneath Pamela's fingernails. He was arrested in March of 2019. A motive for the crime has not been made public yet. Pamela's family members were very happy to hear the great news when investigators told them about her arrest. Kristen Denise Smart was born on February 20th, 1977 in Augsburg, Germany. She and her family moved to Stockton, California when she was a child. In 1996, Kristen enrolled at a California Polytechnic State University. On May 25th, she attended a party at a frat house. At approximately 2 a.m., she was found passed out on a neighbor's lawn by 2 fellow students, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis. They helped Kristen to her feet and decided to walk her back to her nearby dorm. Another student, Paul Flores, joined the group and offered to help get Kristen there safely. After a while of walking, Tim Davis left since he lived off campus. Thereafter, Anderson left and taught Flores to get Kristen to her dorm as he lived closest to her. That would be the last time Kristen was ever seen alive. She was reported missing to the University Police Department. They believed Kristen went on an unannounced vacation, but when she did not return, the investigation started. Paul Flores was questioned. He said that after he and Kristen reached his dorm, he left her to walk back to her dorm on her own. Investigators have always seen Paul Flores as the main suspect. Between 1996 and 2007, investigators have conducted numerous searches at houses belonging to the Flores family. An earring that potentially belonged to Kristen was found by a tenant at a former residence of Paul Flores' mom. In September 2016, investigators excavated an area on the campus. They did find a few items had they decided to analyze. No more information on those items have been made public. In 2021, investigators started searching at Paul Flores' home once again. They used ground-penetrating radar and dogs. Numerous items of interest were found. This included a car belonging to Paul Flores' father, Ruben Flores. On April 13, 2021, Paul Flores and Ruben Flores were arrested by the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office in relation to the case. Paul Flores is being held without bail, and his 8-year-old father under $250,000 bail. San Luis Obispo County Sheriff Ian Parkinson said that he could not reveal what new evidence led to the break in the case. He also said that he is confident that he will find Kristen's remains. Kristen's parents made a statement after hearing about the news. Could have held his horrible secret for nearly 25 years. Denying us the chance to allow our daughter to rest is an unrelenting and unforgiving pain. We now put our faith in the justice system and move forward, comforted in the knowledge that Kristen has been held in the hearts of so many and that she has not been forgotten. We are pleased that Kristen's case has now moved to the District Attorney's Office, where we know we will be in good hands, and look forward to the day when there will be justice for Kristen. To heal, we must remember not only Kristen, but also every heart that carried Kristen and our family in theirs. Kristen's story is ultimately one of unwavering commitment, resilience, and immense gratitude. Just an hour after I finished the video, more information has been made public. San Luis Obispo County District Attorney Dan Dow said that Paul Flores took the life of Kristen after he tried to assault her. He said that it took place in Paul Flores' dorm room and that Ruben Flores helped dispose of Kristen's body. Dan also claims that they now know where her body was buried. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.